Welcome to another episode of Boots on the Ground, where we discuss Israel's politics, wars, and identity. On this week's episode, I'm joined with Rabbi Ben Packer, the director of the Jerusalem Heritage House, and we're going to discuss developments in Judea and Samaria that have not been reported in the news since the beginning of the war. And now that I have a Torah representative here with me, we're going to get into a little bit of the Chareadi Draft issue, which is something that I know him and I disagree on. Before we get into the show, as always, I want to say thank you to our partners here at the Jerusalem Media Group and our sponsors at BeThereIsrael.com. BeThereIsrael.com provides live video streaming services for all your events here in Israel. So even if your friends and family can't be at your event here in Israel, you can stream it to them live from abroad. And now, let's get to the show. Welcome, Ben.
Oh, very happy to be here.
It's great to have you. All right, so let's get straight into it. What has been going on in Judea and Samaria since the beginning of the war that we don't hear about on the news?
Wild things, absolutely wild things. Over the last few decades, as many people who have been around are aware, but it's not so much in the news, under what's called the Fayad plan, a lot of people are familiar with that, but even before the official Fayad plan, basically what was happening was Arabs were just taking over land. State land, they were just taking it over and settling on it. And they'd plant some trees. Next thing you know, tents would go up. Then they'd have some sheep. They'd be walking around with them. And next thing you know, no Jews could go to that area. This was happening all over the place. Organizations like Regavim and other organizations were screaming about this the whole time. But no one did anything. This is just the way it was. And huge amounts of Judea and Samaria were just being taken over by these land grabs. And this went on for decades until finally the Palestinian Authority got more organized under the Fayad plan. And they actually started building roads and all kinds of infrastructure to take more and more land.
So you're saying that for the last decade or so...
No, more than that.
For more than the last decade. Well, let's focus on the last 10 years. We don't have to go back that far. Over the last 10 years and more, there's been an organized attempt to settle the land of Judea and Samaria by the... I don't want to say the P word, but the Arab settlers.
The Arabs at the command of the Palestinian Authority, okay, with the funding of the European Union and other international bodies.
All right, have been settling the land of Judea and Samaria all over, not just areas A and B,
only C.
In the area C, which is under Israeli civil and military control.
Correct.
Okay. That's the reality before the war.
That's right.
Okay, so now...
Seemingly unstoppable.
And then you're saying there are organizations that were fighting this, that were trying to play it in courts, but there wasn't much progress being made.
Right, there's the Bedouin place right outside Jerusalem, Khan al-Ahmar. Everyone knows about that place, right?
Right.
By the way, it's still there.
And the Supreme Court ruled it has to be demolished.
There's ruled numerous times it has to be demolished. And it's still there. So... yeah, it's seemingly unstoppable in a way. And that was built, and the Palestinian Authority invested in it. The European Union invested in it. It's literally on a highway. It's actually dangerous.
Right.
But there's tons of places like this.
Okay.
And so this is the way things went for decades. No one could seemingly stop it.
Okay.
All of a sudden comes along October 7th.
Right.
And literally the next day, there's a complete change. And Jews start to say, 1 second, some of these people are in the middle of nowhere, but some of them are literally right next to Jewish communities. And they're looking into those Jewish communities all the time. And we're not going to let happen what happened in Gaza, on the Gaza border. And that's not going to happen to us. These people aren't supposed to be here anyway. They didn't buy this land. They haven't lived here forever. This was a political move for them to come here, grab the land, spy on us, and potentially attack us in the future. Just like happened during the Second Intifada.
Okay.
So people went out and said, "You got to go. It's not tenable situation." And the military, the IDF, not officially, but to some degree, agreed. It is dangerous. It's a dangerous situation. So you had situations where all these squatters were now pushed back to where they came from, which are just the regular Arab villages in the area. That's where they came from. They lived there, and then they went out. Right, so then they
created satellite communities.
Satellite communities, exactly. Farther and farther and farther. By the way, the same thing's going on in the Negev as well, of course. Exact same thing. So then they went back to where they came from, so to speak, and now Jews moved onto that land.
Okay.
To hold the land so that it's held by the state. right? So now you have a situation where the safety of Jewish communities is so much better than it was pre-October 7th, where you had to literally monitor these communities at all times to make sure nothing crazy was going on. Now they're not there anymore. So nothing to worry about. Much bigger perimeters. You see the what do you call them in English?
Say it in Hebrew.
The Shin Gimel.
The gate.
The gate of the community being moved farther out, right, from away from the houses. And so sometimes they're right next to the houses. They're moving farther out, so it's a much safer situation.
So you're saying that over the last 2 years, this is something you've also been personally involved in, is you've helped expand now the Jewish communities that are in Yehuda v'Shomron. You've helped create satellite communities of theirs in the no man's land, the empty land that's around.
I helped to some degree, but these guys are really heroes. They're going out there without power. Maybe they have some form of water. They're in the elements, whether it's the winter, it's the rain and the cold, and the summer, it's the heat. They're out there. Okay, and they're getting sheep. They're basically copying what the Arabs did.
Right.
They're planting trees. They're building houses. They're getting sheep. They're walking around. But their walking around provides surveillance for all the local Jewish communities to keep them safe. Whereas what the Arabs are doing was the polar opposite.
And they're doing it on Israeli state-owned land, which is land that is supposed to be controlled by the Israeli government. Anyways.
But for some reason, the state didn't seem to be able to do it on their own. Maybe the army stretched too thin. Maybe the other government bodies are stretched too thin. They don't have the manpower. They don't have the whatever the reason is. It was not being done.
It wasn't being done. And you're saying that there was a void that was being filled by the Arab settlers were settling it. And as we saw on October 7th in Gaza, when the Arab communities get too close to us and they get too comfortable, it gives them the ability to attack us from within. This is what was going on in Yehuda v'Shomron, Judea and Samaria, was that the Arab communities were expanding ever closer and closer and closer on Israeli state-owned land to the Jewish communities.
Up until the gate, even up until the very gates.
Up until the fences, creating an ability where they're not in their own communities further away. They're much closer and able to then do an October 7th styled attack. Well, that's a horrible thing to say.
Things
on communities across Judea and Samaria.
Things did happen in the past, unfortunately. You have the famous incident in Itamar, where the family was killed. But people who lived right next door came in.
So now you're saying that we've had an expansion now of what are called farms. And I don't call them satellite communities. I call them farms because it's usually younger adults with herds of sheep and goats. There's a little bit of agriculture involved too. But by having those herds and those flocks that they're able to then take out to pasture over the land, they're not just a small stationary home. They're actually covering much greater square mileage or square kilometerage of area that they're able to maintain the Israeli control over the Israeli land.
Exactly. And even the army, of course, admits that this is very good for them. And if they see anything, they report it to the army. So there's eyes for the army. And some of them are in Miluim anyway. They're in reserve duty anyway. So that's like having another soldier out there. But besides that, all these guys are reporting back to the army what they see. So now the army, which of course is understaffed now because of what's going on in Gaza and Lebanon and everywhere, they have all these, so to speak, new soldiers.
It's where they have eyes and ears on the ground.
Yeah. Some are armed, some are not, but they're looking.
There's more people to watch. It's more people to see.
And just to emphasize, if you go back in time, when David Friedman was the ambassador under the first Trump administration, he made a point of saying that the Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria only take up 2%, 2.5% of the land area.
Right.
And that was meant to be like a kind of way of saying, like, there's still a lot to talk about, I guess. These farms are covering large amounts of land.
Huge amounts of land.
So those percentages have skyrocketed to areas that are now controlled by Jewish, like you said, farms, communities, whatever you want to call it, right? And those are areas that are now safe in our hands that before were just either we had already lost them or they were in the process of being lost.
Okay, so how does that, through the government system now again, at the end of the day, it's not every man for himself, do whatever you want. We still live in a fairly well-governed society. We have our criticisms of the government and the processes, but how does that play out moving forward now? How does that, instead of it being 4 guys and 10 sheep, on a hilltop, how does that turn now into a more stable, more permanent presence.
Well, what's
that
going to
can-
It's a good question. What's going to have to happen is the motzot, the local governments,
Right.
are going to have to take the lead and figure out how they're going to plan this situation. So basically, what you do in a normal country, when you plan, should we run a power line over here? Do we have enough power? Do we need more power? All that kind of stuff. They're going to have to do all that work now. It's going to be a lot of work because they're way behind because there's already people out there.
Right.
But they're going to have to play catch up. And the reality is there were always people screaming, what about the security situation? What about the security situation? And people would say, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Well, we know.
We
have a few hints now.
We kind of found out, pretty close to it. And therefore, everyone's saying, oh, okay. Okay, so let's not that. We got to first stop that from happening. Then we got to provide the infrastructure. And then we go forward. But first, we have to stop that worst case scenario.
Right, so now,
and that's what's going on.
So let's say moving forward, let's look at it from a different perspective moving forward for a minute. Because in the end of the day, we all know about the housing crisis in Israel, that the housing prices are too high, whether it's a supply and demand issue, it's a geography, everyone's crammed into one tiny little coastal region. We have all of these atudot kalka, we have all this reserve land in Yehuda v'Shomron, Judea and Samaria, that's right next to Jerusalem, right next to, all of the center. You go from Tel Aviv, you could be 15 minutes later in the communities next to Ariel over there from the Merkaz. You have all these areas. Do you see a place for private developers to come in and build huge communities connected with highways or trains into the center that could then not only boost the population, but also boost the comfort of living, the standards of living that we have in the center of Israel, where there's already very high population densities? And then also by providing a civilian base in those areas, how does that increase the security even greater than we have now?
Well, first of all, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of land in Judea and Samaria, which is called in English survey land.
Okay.
Which ironically actually means unsurveyed land.
Okay.
Right? It means land that has not been surveyed. Meaning it either is state land or it's private land, but it's not registered as either. And these are huge amounts of land. So most of it is not private land because nobody owns that much land. Right. So it's mostly state land. As we're finding out, one of the main things Bezalel Smotrich is doing is and it costs money, it's not free, but he's been paying to survey the land. He's got professionals out there surveying this land and then declaring it, as it comes out, almost always, state land. And of course, the far left is screaming against this because he's already declared more state land in the last few years than in the last 30 years. This just wasn't being done. So all that land that we had, theoretically, to use, we couldn't legally use because nobody had zoned it as state land. It just sat there.
So it's not just that it's being surveyed physically, go with a stick and a survey thing, like you think of
They check the registry.
You check landowner registry.
The history,
basically,
usage,
right.
Satellite footage.
So
it's not cheap. I mean, it's a whole process.
You create a baseline of ownership that shows either this land is ownerless, in which case it's state land, or there's a private owner that abandoned it, or there's a private owner that's on it.
Of course, people can argue that it's theirs.
There's a process.
So of course, it's a whole process. Like in the rest of the country as well. This has not been done before so much. In the last 30 years, it was hardly done at all. And the way it was looked at was, if it's not state land yet, it probably never will be. Just let it go. Because that was the momentum of Oslo.
That was the Oslo process.
Yeah. So if it's not state land now, why are we going to spend money to mess with something? And this was said in the last government, in Naftali Bennett's government, right? Everyone makes a face, of course. And Naftali Bennett's government, the Minister of Transportation,
who was? Do you remember?
Michaeli,
okay.
The Nazis' granddaughter. So she stopped a lot of the road projects in Judea and Samaria because she said, "Why do we need these roads? They're not going to be ours anyway." So she said that. So I mean, how are you going to develop infrastructure if you have a minister in a government that should have never existed, but nonetheless, just shutting down projects? I mean, that's insane.
But using their logic, it made sense. If in her
using money was already spent.
Oh, but using her logic, if it's land that we're going to be ceding to a future Palestinian state to begin with, why should I invest in developing it now?
Yeah, they say we're messianic.
All right, exactly. So again, I'm not saying our logic holds the same as hers, but in her logic, that made sense.
I suppose, but it defies the facts on the ground.
Listen, facts.
And you can't ask real estate developers
to go
come in and
develop
even look
if
at something.
if you're not going to develop the infrastructure.
Or if
for
you're going
them.
to start doing it and then stop. That's even worse. Right? You jump into a project, next thing you know, the road's not built. I mean, that's crazy.
That is
But
crazy.
to answer your question, is 100%. There's so much that can be done. And now, with the infrastructure being built, when tons of roads are being built, now if you go anywhere, you just see construction everywhere. Construction is everywhere. Also in Jerusalem, also outside Jerusalem, construction is everywhere. Right? They're building roads, building this, bridges, tunnels, the good ones, and all over. And that's going to lead, to massive development, which hopefully will help with the housing crisis and with quality of life and literally with everything. I don't want to sound like whatever, like a dreamer here, but there's reality.
But
to
what's
that.
wrong with dreaming?
No,
If you don't have a vision of what could be, then you can never achieve a goal. So, again,
but a lot of it, but like you're saying, a lot of it is in our heads. If you figure, like that woman said, it's not going to be ours anyway, or we're not sure, then
that sounds like a bad investment. Whereas
Yeah.
if you accept the reality that this is part of the land of Israel, it always was, it always will be, and that there's no reason not to develop it and use it, properly, then let's invest in it and let's help it. Let's use it as another tool to make everything here better.
yeah, but also as you see that it's just some insane things that have gone on. I was in a place recently right outside Kidumim.
Okay.
Kidumim is actually where Bezalel Smotrich lives, so he's well aware of it. Right? If you go to this hilltop outside of Kidumim, which is just now Jews moved onto it a few months ago. Okay, between that hilltop and Kvish 6, the Highway 6, right?
Highway 6, the main north-south,
Right.
main thoroughfare of the state of Israel.
There's no Jewish community at all, not one. It's just they're Arab communities, and that's it. There's no Jewish community between there all the way to 6, which then goes to the beach, and you can see the beach clear as day from there. You see the ocean, you see everything. What kind of planning? I mean, that's crazy, but that's the way the political system has been for a long time. It's being corrected now, and very quickly. Okay, not maybe as quick as we always want, but very quickly. Mistakes of the last 30 years, 35 years, maybe more, are being corrected because of October 7th. Just like in the army, just like in many areas of Israeli society, things are being corrected that has taken a very long time.
So if
I don't want to foreshadow on your next topic.
I'm saying, so if I see where you're going with, you're saying that in the end of the day, October 7th was a horrible tragedy. It was a terrible crisis. But from within that, many good things have happened because of it.
Unbelievable things.
Unbelievable good things have happened before that. And my question, and you sound pretty hopeful that even within the next 11 months, we're going to have a new election. And you sound hopeful that even after that election, it's going to continue. Otherwise, we're talking about for just the next maximum another 11 months.
Well, first of all, 11 months is a long time these days.
That's true.
Things are
especially with the news in Israel on a daily basis.
Every day is an
Every
adventure.
day is an adventure.
So, or maybe Netanyahu will call off the election and just keep going, like Trump in America.
Not really sure how that works,
Nah,
but
just
okay.
kidding. That's an American conspiracy psychosis.
No.
Anyway, but I don't know. Listen, I don't think anybody in Israel, I mean, maybe Amit Segal and these guys, they have an idea of what the heck is going to happen in the elections. I mean, no idea. No idea. How is the Israeli public going to view the current Israeli coalition pre-October 7th, post-October 7th, the whole thing? I don't know. I have no
And who are the new players going to be on the field, and maybe how does that affect all of it?
I think it's one of those things where it literally it's no one can. It's so wild, right? But between now and then, the government does seem rather stable, as it has pretty much the entire time it's been in place, which is a rarity in Israel, obviously. And the things that have been accomplished are just absolutely unbelievable.
All right,
and I assume that will continue.
All right, so let's go straight, lead into the next subject of the episode today. Talk about government stability, as we've seen that one of the major issues that does shake that stability and has probably the biggest potential to make this coalition crash earlier than its expiration date would be the whole issue of the Chareadi draft,
right,
of the ultra-Orthodox draft. Now, you and I have personally had this conversation.
I just want to say, it should have happened a month after the government was founded. This was the main request from the Charedim, demand from the Chareidi parties to be in the government.
Right.
This is the main thing. And yet for years, without any law being passed, they stayed in the government. And they're still in the government.
Right.
Kind of.
But
they're not bringing it down.
Exactly. So, like I said, it's one of the things that has the most potential but it has,
but it's crazy.
and it's had the most
How
potential the
wild,
whole
though.
time.
It was their main demand.
Right.
And
So-
it's been years.
But let's get into it. Ben, you and I have personally, in passing, had this conversation.
On Facebook.
We've had it there too. We've had it in person. And both of us, I still serve in the reserve duty. Ben, for all of your black and white look, you served in Givati, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Also my time. You're a man of service yourself. You serve on the emergency response team in the old city of Jerusalem. You're not afraid to carry a gun yourself. You've lived the ideal of national service. And it's still something that's extraordinarily important to you. But also you have a very different outlook on the Torah world, on learning Torah and the importance of that to the Jewish people, and where you and I have nuanced disagreements. So I want to say a little bit about where I'm coming from, and then we're going to turn over to you, and then we're going to talk about what's a real solution to this. No one's going to go arrest thousands of people, throw them into jail, or throw them into a uniform. We know that's not realistic, but how can we solve the current reality? The way I look at it is there's two issues here at play. One, there's a manpower need for the army, which can be solved in many different ways, not necessarily only from the Chareidi population, but from other populations that are serving less as well. And the other is a question of mutual responsibility and mutually, I'm not really sure what the right word I'm looking for is, a mutual level of responsibility for the national cause, and accepting that the current governmental system of the state of Israel is the state, and it's not a state that's just like any other that we've lived under in the diaspora. It's more than that. It's more of it's an end of a diaspora, beginning of a redemption process, and that we're all part of it. The Chareidi world, the secular world, and everything in the middle. And we all have to share. I hate the word burden, because I don't think anyone I ever speak to views their army service as a burden, but sharing that responsibility and that great privilege that it is to protect the state. Now, I view that there's an importance for learning Torah as well, and that the Torah is what's kept us a people for thousands of years in the diaspora. There's the famous saying, whenever the Jews kept Shabbat, Shabbat kept the Jews, right? Where following the rules of halakha and learning Torah is what kept us strong in who we are throughout the years and years of exile. And how do you balance those two? And I've presented many solutions on this show in the past. I've written them. I want to hear how you square that circle and how you make those two work together so that there isn't animosity from one camp to the other camp, and how we also increase the numbers of service.
Okay, so first of all, I will just say this. I think the whole learning thing is maybe not the main issue, although that is in the media what is portrayed also from the Chareidi side, maybe primarily from the Chareidi side, is the learning issue. First of all, the Dati Leumi community very much values learning.
Yeah, and that's plenty of it.
Yeah, it's not like that's like a purely Chareidi thing, first of all. And there are Dati Leumi people who learn all the time, maybe a less percentage, obviously, but they don't go to the army, or they go very little, or they go to the Rabbanut of the army. So like, okay, that's not, in my opinion, that's not the main issue. The main issue here is practicality. The Dati Leumi world, the religious Zionist world, if you go into a religious Zionist Judaica shop, bookstore, right, you'll see tons and tons of books on philosophy. They're all about philosophy. In the Chareidi neighborhood, a few books here and there, the Maharal, a few famous rabbis. But otherwise, not so much. The Dati Leumi world thinks about big ideas, about how things should be, how things could be. The Chareidi world thinks about how are things right now, and how do I keep it that way?
Okay.
And so
first I've never heard.
And so when you look at the army, like it's almost baffling to me to hear people talk about this idea of sending tons of Charedim to the army, because the numbers are so terrible in the army of people who are Chareidi that go in and don't come out Chareidi. The number is close to 100%. Now, of course, you could argue the people who are going to the army are not the strongest Charedim. Of course, that's the case. However, the numbers are just so extreme. If you go to the Chareidi, I'm involved. I work with lone soldiers, right? That's what I do. So I'm going to army bases all the time. I'm talking to people who are in these different units, all kinds, but also the Chareidi units as they're called, right? The idea that any yeshiva student could go to any of these units is just crazy. Now, Hashmonaim.
I was about to say,
Does
that hold for the Chativat Chashmonaim?
The new
Chativat Chareidi that's working now.
It's only been 2 drafts of approximately 50 people each.
Three.
Okay, listen, let's see what happens. They seem to be making a real effort. Okay, however, it's important to point out, as I learned in college, but didn't really understand at the time. There's no such thing as free lunch in economics class. They teach you this, right? No such thing as free lunch. It's not free. Someone's got to pay. Okay? Someone's got to pay. So, and when it comes to the army, who's it going to be? Who's going to pay for these Chareidi soldiers coming in, if they do come in? And the answer is the more liberal, left-wing ideologies that are in the army are going to have to pay. They're going to have to cede ground to the Chareidi side. It's not just they're going to come in and just make new space in the army. It doesn't work that way. They're going to come in and take space. Who's going to give up that space? And the Chareidi, I mean, what a Chareidi person is someone who doesn't give up on those certain values. They're not going to do it, right? So the idea that the army can go as business as usual, and just there's a ton of examples. I don't even know where to start, honestly. But I'll give you one because it was in the newspaper years ago and it's documented.
Right.
Tekeses, army ceremonies, right? When they made the Chareidi units, they said explicitly, if there's issues with religion at the ceremonies, then the Chareidi units will have their own ceremonies. Issues with modesty, issues with things like that, right? They'll have their own ceremonies. Immediately, all the colonels, the machats of those groups
said no.
No, there's not going to be any separate ceremony by me. We're all in the same. We're all in the same battalion. Everybody will be together. Now I go to these ceremonies. Okay.
Right.
It's like going to the beach in Tel Aviv.
I wouldn't go that far, but okay.
In the summer, and I'm not judging it. It's not me judging it. I'm not telling somebody how to dress to come to an event.
You're talking about the audience, not the ceremony itself. Okay, fine.
The audience. People are bringing their families, though.
Right.
How are you asking a Chareidi family to come to this event?
Okay, so
and then get there, and they're at the beach in Tel Aviv.
All right, so 1 second. Ben,
that's just one example.
That's one example. I hear that's
There's
a good.
tons
No, but that's a
more.
really good example of something
more.
that it's.
There's tons more.
Right. So 1 second. I had this because you made a good point. Is that someone always has to. There's no free lunch. So if you want to bring all the Charedim into the army, someone has to give. There has to be a give and a get here. It's something I said. I don't know if it was on this show or it was somewhere else I was interviewed. I said, in the end of the day, when we look at the manpower potential in different communities, the army over the last 15 years has invested enormous resources in women serving in combat roles, in mixed gendered units, in different roles for women. And I've always said that just seems like a very bad return on investment. No insult to the women who are doing it. There are I wouldn't say plenty. There are some women who are extraordinarily physically capable, even of doing what I do. They're rare. There's few. You can't create full units out of them, I don't think. And the reality is that the mixed gendered units are of the quality that are much lower than of the all-male units that they're competing with. It's the end of the day that the standard is lower. They serve a different purpose. And I said, of all of the women going into those units, with the amount of potential there is lower than if we just created all Chareidi units that were independent, like Chativat HaChashmonaim, which the army's doing from everything I can tell, and I have a few friends that serve there now in command roles or planning roles, that they're doing right in the cultural sense. They have tremendous greater potential. A group of boys, care how religious or not religious they are, has a greater physiological potential than a group of girls. On a one-to-one basis, there are definitely some girls that have more potential than some guys. But as a group, the men will always have a greater physiological potential. And men, no offense, they're stupider than girls at that age. And you can get them to do things that normally a person who's thinking in their right mind would never put themselves in that situation in. So there's greater potential, so why invest in A, invest in B? Will that change? That's already a political question that we can answer in the future.
It would have to change dramatically.
Right, but again, they create...
Think about this. In the Magav, in the border police.
Right.
They started now a Chareidi unit in the border police. The border police is overwhelmingly mixed.
Right.
It's one giant mixed unit. I don't know what the actual numbers are, but I would say it's definitely close to 50-50, if not more,
Okay.
There's a lot of women in the border police. And now they have a Chareidi unit in the border police that has nothing to do
With the rest
with
of
the
the border.
entire rest of the border police. Now, how's that going to work? Maybe it works right now because there's only a certain number of them. But let's just say
It gets bigger and
it
bigger.
gets huge. And then what?
So I think the bigger question comes
Someone
down
has to give.
I think the bigger question comes down because you can create a brigade. You can even create an entire division because a division is its own. A brigade and division are both logistically independent from anything else. You can create entire units of the army. The question is as you move up that chain of command, and as someone who stays, for example, a Chareidi guy who comes in, starts the bottom and works his way up, he's going to have to stay within that unit. He's very limited to how much up the ladder he can go before he has to come out of that bubble. I think that's where we're going to see the biggest problem is when they want to come out of that bubble and go into the rest of the army to keep going up a ladder at some point, either they're going to say, well, this isn't what I want for myself, or you're going to get pushback from the army on that point, and then you know that you're going into a very limited career path.
You're also going to have pushback from society when you start to see these things
More-
go on.
more and more.
The video I say that I think to me the most video that told the story the most is this famous video that most Israelis saw. Right, it was on a bus, and there was a secular woman in one seat and a guy with payas in a Hasidic outfit in the next seat. And they got some kind of argument about, I don't know, whatever, Israelis. And the woman said to him, "Why can't you go to the army?" So he says, "Actually, I'm an officer in combat." She goes, "Then why do you still look like that?"
Right.
And it was like, A lot of secular people look at the army like a Baal Tshuva yeshiva. Just the opposite.
The opposite. To
The
get
opposite.
You, to make
If you told a Baal
secular.
Tshuva yeshiva, right, that 30 secular people are coming to the yeshiva tomorrow, what would they say? Great.
Great. We'll make them religious.
We'll make them religious. So when you tell the secular people 50 Chareidi guys are coming to the army,
Great.
they
We'll
say,
make them secular.
no problem. We know how to do that.
So Ben, let's talk practically now. Let's talk practically for a minute. Let's just say you became defense minister tomorrow, but the only thing you can do is do something about this Chareadi draft issue. You can make whatever law you wanted. You could create any program you wanted. What would be again?
It's a point to point out. You said defense minister.
Or
am I also the Supreme Court?
You're also the
Because if
Supreme
I'm
Court.
not the Supreme Court, it doesn't really matter.
You're also the Supreme Court.
Which, by the way, is a big Chareidi point. In this whole thing, with judicial reform and everything, it's all part of the same thing.
So again, but you can create any model, any framework for drafting to balance this Chareadi draft slash economic issues. What would be the framework that you think would be both practically applicable to the Chareidi world today, also serve the army's interest of increasing its available manpower, and provide some semblance of balance within Israeli society?
Again, it wouldn't necessarily be that difficult to do physically. The problem would become is what happens to these other people who are getting pushed out. That's what's going to happen. You're going to have people who are getting pushed out of positions because it doesn't align with the Chareidi way of life. Right now, for example, like you mentioned, you have friends who are commanders in Hashmonaim.
Correct.
Right? But that's not going to be the case soon. Soon, all the commanders in Hashmonaim are going to be Chareidi. That's the idea.
I mean, they are Charedim, but...
Oh, well, some people in there are not Haredi.
Right. Some are not. But
there's a lot of commanders in there. They're not Haredi because there weren't.
There
now
weren't
they're
any.
making an effort.
And the idea being is that they're going to grow their own commanders
they're
now
grow their
from
own
within.
everything.
Right.
Okay, so
But that takes time.
It takes time, but even so, like you have to understand that the army, even though there are certain units and divisions and all the different kinds of stuff, it is one body. And so there's a lot of mixing that goes on, you know, when stuff happens, this, that, and the other. I'll give you one. There's a million examples, but I'll give you one. In Hebron.
Right.
In Hebron, you have border police and you have soldiers, right? So on a normal day, the soldiers guard their posts and the border police guard their posts. However, sometimes when there's a lot of people there or for whatever reason, it changes up. And border police and soldiers guard the same posts. So what happens then? What happens then is the guys who are in an only guy unit, maybe not religious necessarily, but they're in an only guy unit. There's no girls in their unit, right?
Right.
All of a sudden, are guarding with girls.
Right.
Right? Maybe all night, maybe, you know, as is done, right? Now what? if they bring the Chareidi unit to Hebron, you're going to kick all the border police out to keep this from happening? The Chareidi world will not tolerate mistakes. They will not. Right? That's part of the deal.
The part of the deal is that they're very inflexible with
certain things.
With certain rules,
and these are especially the things
that those are the things that are the problem point.
Exactly. And that also some people, maybe not the average soldier, but certain people within the army have philosophies
are going to keep pushing
very
those points.
Opposed to this kind of stuff. Extremely opposed. And we're not even talking politics yet. We're not even talking right wing, left wing. We're not talking human rights. You know what human rights are? The Charedim have no idea. They've never heard of them. They don't believe in them. They would laugh at them if you told them what they are. They're not the Torah.
Because there's halacha.
They're not the Torah, so
Exactly.
so they don't care. So I mean, we're not even talking about that stuff yet. We're just talking about the day-to-day stuff, right? And so I mean, look, Netzach Yehuda.
No, but again,
right? Netzach Yehuda is a Chareidi unit, supposedly, right? Okay, let's say fine, right? Are they different than all the other units? They are. Are they treated differently? They are. America tried to sanction them. And a unit in the army, they tried to sanction a unit. Which one did they pick? The Chareidi one.
I mean, I don't think they picked it because it's Chareidi. They picked it because it has an extraordinarily high number of Americans who serve there who don't have Israeli citizenship.
I think they picked it because they didn't like the stories they heard about them. Which, if you know anybody in that unit, you wouldn't be too surprised by.
I know quite a few, but that's not...
I mean, they have a different way.
You can pick the reason why someone chooses to do something as long as they don't tell you why, but it's also that unit specifically brings a whole different issue to the front.
There's nobody
who
was in that unit who was surprised
by the stories that came out,
or that someone or that by the accusation, or by the need to fight them, because they are different. It is a different unit. It is
exactly. They have a different culture.
I think it's better, of course, but other people disagree.
But again, so what?
So that's a problem.
So what framework? Again, let's get back to the question.
You're going to build a whole thing. They're building this Hashmonai thing. People are going in. People are investing. People are getting into it. Who says tomorrow the Supreme Court doesn't say enough with this? There's no such thing as an army unit without girls. There's no such thing as an army unit that doesn't, I don't know what, go to some concert somewhere of who knows whatever nonsense the army's doing. You know, I mean, everyone who's been in the army knows about this kind of stuff.
So wait,
maybe you look the other way. Maybe you ignore it. Maybe you just say, whatever, they feel like this is important. I don't feel like this is important. This other thing is important, so I'll suffer from it. The kind of don't play that game.
So again, to answer the question,
when I was in the army, I could tell you numerous times, and I was in a religious unit, right? But numerous times things happened where I was just like, no, I'm not being involved with that, and whatever, I'm just not. And it happened all the time. And the army dealt with it because, I don't know, it was a second intifada, and I was a good soldier, and they dealt with it.
I guess when I was in the army, we never had time for any of the cultural whatever stuff. It was sort of like, here's a day off, knock yourselves out.
Well, they would do stuff. I mean,
but back to the question. What framework? Again, I want to say, like, we're taking the army needs more people and the Chareidi world. We're taking those as a given. Those are constants that aren't going to change. So my question is like this Chativat Hashmonaim that they've created, is that something that needs to be expanded, encouraged? How do you encourage more Charedim to draft to it? Because again, they're not...
You encourage more Charedim to draft by keeping your word. The second you lie or make a mistake, one or the other, it doesn't really matter, honestly. Either you lie or you make too big a mistake, negligence, right?
Right.
Then you've alienated everybody. And there's so much of that in the past that people don't forget so quickly. So now they started something new. They're making a real effort.
Right.
I'm not, okay, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt.
So you're saying
but if it messes up...
So you're saying that the way to do it would be to have what the army's currently doing, to keep doing it and maintain that standard, the religious standard that they have there, maintain...
And don't think that no one's going to come and try to mess it up.
100%.
And when they do...
But people are going to try and mess up from... Listen, I'm not doing this whole both sides thing, but there's going to be people trying to mess it up from both sides at the same time.
But when the people in the army come to mess it up from that side, if they fight back successfully, okay. And if they don't, then...
Okay, so
that's what it is.
All right, Ben. So we're gonna end here at this point. But first, I ask all my guests to share a thought, an idea that gives them a feeling of hope or optimism to the future. Like, what is it that you wake up in the morning, and if you're having a bad day and you think everything's going to the crapper, you're like, wait a minute, this is what's going on. This is what I think about. And then it reminds you that we have a bright future ahead of us and that things are going to be great. I'm going to give you a minute to think about an answer.
I don't need a minute. I cheat.
Yeah, but I need a minute.
Ah.
I need it. So I'm going to give you a minute to think about the answer. In the meantime, again, I'm going to say thank you one last time to our partners here at the Jerusalem Media Group and to our sponsors at BeThereIsrael.com, who provide live streaming services for all of your events here in Israel. So even if you can't be here in person to join the event, they can stream it live for you to anywhere in the world. BeThereIsrael.com. All right, Ben.
I would just say I bet
No.
cheat on this question because I live in the old city of Jerusalem.
Okay.
So when you live in the old city of Jerusalem and you wake up and you see all the Jews going to do Jewish stuff, people wearing tefillin in the street, bar mitzvahs, simchas, weddings. Out my window, I see Jewish victory. I see stuff that didn't go on for thousands of years from my window every single day. So, I mean, it's when you literally take a second to look what's going on in this country, the old city is a bit of an extreme example. But really, it doesn't matter. Anywhere you look and you see the Jewish pride, you see the Jewish confidence, you see the stuff that just did not exist for so long. I mean, listen, I can't tell you 100% where this is going. But, I mean, it looks like it's going very well. I wouldn't say I make an effort. It's just there in front of your face if you just look at it.
Wow. That's awesome. All right. Ben, thank you for joining us. Rabbi Ben Packer, the director of the Jerusalem Heritage House. Thank you for having us. And as always, I'm Yisrael Chai.